Welcome to Chris's Granite Paradise. Today we are talking about how to make a beautiful and efficient shelf for your rocks or other heavy items out of relatively inexpensive concrete patio pavers. These that I'm showing you here, I purchased at Home Depot by the pallet. These are fairly large pavers. They're about 2 to 2.5 inches thick and 24 inches by 24 inches, so 4 square feet, weighing about 100 pounds each. I bought a couple of pallets of them to do this patio, as you're seeing, and I had quite a few left over. I made a pathway out front, and then I think I had 7 stones left, which is what I ended up using to make this little sculpture that you're looking at. Now, the bottom of the sculpture is made of granite and other types of rock, but the upper portion is made of these pavers. Some of these sculptures that are designed to be more used as a shelf for other rocks rather than as a sculpture per se, I like to cover them so much that you really can't see them or see how they're built. And so I'm having to dig around in here to remember that there were the 7 stones that I mentioned earlier. Now, depending on your budget and physical abilities, you may want to opt for smaller pavers. However, I would definitely lean towards the bigger ones because you want this thing to be substantial and not easy to bump into and knock over. You don't want a little glass china cabinet to put all your rocks on. So, like I said, you can see how small this sculpture is, and yet it's made of 7 stones, and just those 7 pavers weigh 700 pounds, and there's probably about another 1,000 pounds of rocks piled onto it. If your project is going to be sitting on the ground, make sure you level the ground and tamp it down as much as you possibly can, and I would recommend getting a large piece of scrap quartz or granite. Quartz is best, the synthetic quartz, because it does not break, and use it as a base. And upon completing the project, you can bury whatever shows with mulch or gravel. Remember, as I have mentioned in other videos about building the sculptures, you need basically a snowshoe to spread the weight out. And of course, the larger your project and the heavier it is, the bigger and thicker base you would want. Most of my sculptures have large bases, and they're 2, 3, even 4 layers of quartz thick. I do want to interject an important note about the spacers that you use. You want to use some spacers because it gives you more space. You know, in this case, the pavers are 2 inches thick, and if you just stack them on top of each other, then you're only going to have 2-inch spaces for your rocks, which doesn't make for much. So I used cores, which I have an infinite supply of, that are also made of stone and synthetic materials, some of them, but most of them are natural stone. And they look clean because they're all the same as each other. I mean, you could use broken pieces of brick. You could use, really anything that gives you some space. But since we're using 4 of them, inevitably you end up with a gap because, at least in my case, being that they're made of stone, none of them are exactly the same thickness. And also your concrete pavers will have irregularities. So keep on hand a supply of these. These come from your bags of bread that you buy at the store. They're the little clips or whatever you call them. Or you can cut up old credit cards. Obviously, make sure you get rid of any identifying information and to get rid of any wobbles. Another thing I want to say is that you want them to be as directly above each other as possible. No matter how you offset your pavers to give yourself space, make sure that your cores, I say cores because that's what I used, make sure they're directly over each other as much as possible so that they transfer the weight to the ground and don't put stress on your pavers. Because remember, your pavers weigh 100 pounds each, and then you're going to probably put a lot of rock on there as well. And you don't want incidents to occur. And you could do this visually. I mean, if you're off 1/8 of an inch here and there, nobody's going to care, and it really won't affect anything. And another important note about your offset is make sure you offset in a balanced manner. If you lean all the stones sticking out in one direction, obviously it gives you less space for rocks and it is more likely to fall over. You don't want these falling over. Let's head over to the patio now, and I want to show you guys how to build this from start to finish using some cardboard and some spacers, since they don't weigh 100 pounds. So I want to show you guys kind of what I was talking about when I was showing you the other sculpture. These are not perfectly square. These are pieces of cardboard that I had cut for another project. So they're a little longer one way than they are the other. Well, we're going to assume that they're square. These represent your pavers. These are the spacers. I'll be using some cores. So a good formula you can use is make your square with your cores or your bricks or whatever you use to be 2/3 the size of your pavers. Okay, so if your pavers are 24 by 24, then you're going to want your square to be 2/3 of 24. It would be 16. So you would measure and come up with 16 inches here. Okay, and 16 inches this way. I hope that makes sense. All right, in this case, these pieces of cardboard are 12 by 14. Again, we're going to assume they're 12 by 12. So I'm going to want my spacers to be 8 inches. So here I measure 8 inches, 8 inches. Okay, and again, they don't have to be exact, but the reason I say 1/3 is so that it allows you to offset quite a bit, which makes a lot more space for your rocks. And yet there's still enough weight and center of gravity that it'll never fall over. So let's take our first paver and take 2 sides of your paver to line up with your cores. So I don't know if the camera's aimed right, you can see. So on this side, my spacers are actually on the edge, and also on this side they're on the edge. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And then so these 2 sides are overhanging. Now you want to take 4 more spacers, and remember what I said, you need to put them directly above the other ones. Try to imagine as if you had drilled a hole through the stones and that these are a single pipe or a tube. So you get down and kind of look under there. You got to kind of eyeball it. Is a term I like to use. Now your next paver. So I hope that makes sense to you. You can see they're directly, that one's a little off. It helps if you look at them from various different angles. That'll help you get them more exactly above each other. Okay. I'm kind of using a combination of me holding the camera and also using a camera stand. Now the next one I would offset in the opposite direction. And again, this is kind of exaggerated. So now if you look now, the spacers show on these 2 sides of the paver. Okay, and look at all the space it gives you for your rocks here. Right? So I can set that down without it falling over. Now you take 4 more spacers. Again, try to put them immediately above the other ones. You gotta kind of get down sideways and look from a few different angles to get them to be right. So again, you see these, if we go down and look, can see these are a little off. Just shove those over. Gives you an idea. They're roughly over each other. For a cardboard sculpture, I think we're doing good enough. Now I would take another piece here. Now I'm going to go off like that. We're going to kind of do no. Now we'll do this again. Take 4 more spacers. Put them directly over each other. Then we'll do it again. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how this works. You can see this row of spacers here is all directly above each other. They're a little off. I'm kind of doing it quick for the video, but I hope this gives you an idea. So this is one pattern you can do. It's just basically opposite, 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 opposite. Left, right, left, right. I'm going to show you another pattern really quickly. Okay, so we're back down to the 4 original spacers. Take a piece of a paver, and again line up the 2 sides with the spacers, just like before. Try to get them directly over each other. Now we're going to go, instead of going opposite like this, now I'm just going to offset it the other direction, but still on the same side. And I know I said not to do this on an ongoing basis, but for one layer you're okay to do that because it gives us a nice pattern, which you'll see here in a minute. Take another, now we go like that. This gives you some space for much larger stones. And again, this is the reason I like to use the 24-inch by 24-inch, or even bigger if you can find bigger pavers, because they're so heavy you can get away with a little bit of this. Okay, so this you can see is a slightly different layout, but as in the first instance, you want the spacers directly above the spacers below, because that transfers the weight evenly. But if you do this kind of a pattern, it gives you, you kind of lose some space here, but you gain a shelf here that you can put some pretty hefty rocks on. Again, remember, instead of cardboard, each of these pavers would be 2 inches thick. So you got 2 inches, you got however thick your spacer is, and in my case they're about 1.25 inches or so. So you got 3 of those spacers, 4 of those spacers between this shelf and this shelf, and 1, 2, 3 pavers. So you'd have 6 inches plus almost a foot you would have here if we were doing this with the concrete pavers. So it gives you a place for some really hefty rocks. I think this is the pattern that I used on the other sculpture that I showed you. And it's kind of like a spiral. If you can imagine, you can step from here to here. Then you could step from here to here. And you could step from here to here, and so forth. If you can imagine, it's like a spiral staircase, which really looks nice and gives you a lot of options when you're piling on the boulders. You can really come up with any pattern you want as long as it is symmetrical and balanced. Like I said, you don't want them all leaning off one way, because that's how you end up with probably more than smashed toes. You would have a smashed U. So please be careful doing this. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's useful to you. I know some of you who have been here really have enjoyed the sculptures and how useful they are to put rocks on. Well, for those of you who do not have access to a granite shop, this is an option to do some things with your rocks outside. And the concrete is really good because it pulls water away from the rocks. It's plenty strong, and it's heavy enough that, you know, if your kids are running around and somebody bumps into it, it's not going to fall over. God bless you guys. Please like, share, and subscribe, and by all means, come visit sometime.